In my previous life, the neighbor's child put rat poison into our family's drinking water bucket. My entire family of 3 was poisoned and died horribly, but the neighbor said, "The child is young and doesn't understand, we can't help it," then moved away with their whole family. The 4 elderly people in our household died one after another from grief. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back half a month before the poisoning. This time, I will make them pay with blood for their blood debt. My name is Lin Jixia, and everyone in my family calls me Xiaoxia. That pain, I'll never forget it. No, it should be said, I'll never forget it from my past life. When I woke up, I felt as if I had been pulled out of water, drenched from head to toe, my hair stuck to my cheeks, and a metallic, rust-like taste in my mouth. My heart pounded as if it were about to burst out of my throat. The ceiling was white, and I stared at it for a full half-minute. There was a thin crack on it, stretching from the left side of the light fixture all the way to the corner of the wall, like a dried-up riverbed. I knew that crack well. It was from the room I had lived in for over 20 years. After graduating from university, I rented a place outside and only came back to stay on weekends, but I clearly remembered, again, that sharp pain surged back, not in my body, but in my mind. As if 10,000 red-hot needles were simultaneously piercing my temples, I instinctively curled up, clutching my head with both hands, letting out a hoarse groan. Then the images came. No, not memories, more like scenes forcibly shoved into my mind. Each image was so vivid it felt like it was replaying right before my eyes. I saw my mother take a sip from the water cup, then frown and say, "Why does this water taste a bit bitter?" My father took it and tasted it too, saying, "It does have a strange flavor." I even laughed at them, saying it might be old pipes and we should get someone to check it tomorrow. Then came hell. First, my stomach felt like something was twisting, churning, and tearing it from the inside. My mother collapsed first, sliding off her chair, her body curling up like a shrimp, her lips turning purple, her eyes rolling back, and white foam starting to bubble from the corners of her mouth. My father struggled to reach the phone, his hand touching the phone, but then his whole body seemed to collapse like a sack of bones, twitching once, twice, and then he went still. As for me, I remember lying on the floor, fingers digging into the cracks between the tiles, my fingernails tearing up, but I didn't feel any pain, because the agony in my stomach had overwhelmed everything else. My vision began to blur, and my ears buzzed. The last thing I saw was my mother's face, bluish-purple, her eyes wide open, staring in disbelief, unaccepting of death. Then, darkness. I thought that was the end. Wasn't it true that when a person dies, everything just ends? But it wasn't. That memory kept flooding into my mind, like someone was forcing an entire movie into my skull. I saw what happened after my death. Not exactly saw, but some indescribable perception, as if my soul hadn't vanished immediately after death, but instead hovered in midair, taking in every single thing that happened in my house from that day on. I saw my parents' bodies being carried out, covered with white sheets. I saw relatives gathered at my doorstep, crying, some even fainting. I saw the police arrive and detect the presence of tetramine in our drinking water bucket. The words, tetramine, pierced my heart like a knife. Then I saw the family next door, the Wangs, Wang Jiangwo, his wife Lu Cuifan, and their spoiled little beast, Wang Xiaobao. I remember that scene very clearly. When the police knocked on their door, Wang Jiangwo came out in slippers, still smiling. When the police asked if his child had been to our house, he said no. His child was very well behaved and never wandered off. Lu Cuifan stood behind him, and I could see her expression clearly. Some kind of guilt I couldn't name, her mouth downturned, eyes avoiding the police, her hands twisting a piece of cloth over and over. Wang Xiaobao hid behind his mother, peeking at the police with one eye. That expression I'll never forget. No, I'll never forget it in this life, or the last. It wasn't fear. It was the smug guilt of a thief. He knew what he had done, but he thought that as long as he stayed behind the adults, no one could do anything to him. What happened later made me want to crawl out of the ground, go through the wall, and strangle those 2 adults. The police found out. When Wang Xiaobao came to play at my house, he took advantage of our inattention and poured rat poison into our drinking water bucket. When asked why he did it, the reason he gave still makes me shiver when I think about it. He said, "They didn't let me play with the iPad last time, so I wanted to teach them a lesson." By poisoning their drinking water with rat poison. The poison was from his own home. Wang Jiangwo had bought it to kill mice and kept it in the storage room, not even locked, so his kids could take it whenever they wanted. When the police came to talk to Wang Jiangwo, The words Lu Tsuefan had said exploded beside my wandering soul. The child is young, doesn't understand, we can't help it, young, doesn't understand. 11 lives, in my family of 3, along with my grandparents and maternal grandparents, for elderly people, after my parents died, within less than a year, they all passed away one after another from overwhelming grief, a family, clean and empty, not a single person left. They told me, the child is young, doesn't understand. If I could have spoken back then, would have asked them, what about you, are you adults not understanding either? They moved, less than 2 months after the incident. While the neighbors were still buzzing with gossip, the family quietly moved away. No one knows where they went. It was like throwing a stone into water, ripples splash up, but once the surface calms, it's as if nothing ever happened. Yet the blood of my family dried up like that. I wanted to scream, but I had no throat. I wanted to cry, but I had no eyes. I just drifted, watching, remembering, then a sharp pain, back. I jolted upright in bed, gasping for air. My fingers clutched the blanket so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Tears had somehow soaked my face, and my pillow was soaked in a large patch. I was alive. No, to be precise, I was alive again. My trembling hand fumbled for the phone on the bedside table, and I glanced at the date, September 14, 2024. I stared blankly at that date, my mind racing as I calculated the days. September 14th. When did the accident happen in my family? The day before October 1st. The afternoon of September 30th. That meant I had gone back half a month before the accident. Half a month, 15 days. I closed my eyes and forced back the tears. When I opened them again, my eyes were dry. I sat on the bed and replayed those images in my mind, this time, not out of pain, but because I wanted to engrave them into my bones. Every detail, every scene, every expression on every face, I had to remember them clearly, especially Wang Jiangwo and Lu Tsuefan. If Wang Xiaobao was the dog that bit someone, then they were the owners. When a dog bites someone, you don't just beat the dog, you go after the owner. Because without the owner's indulgence and tolerance, a dog wouldn't bite people at random. And in my past life, I didn't even get a chance to confront them. But this life is different. This time, I've returned, and I know something they don't. I know what they plan to do in half a month. This thought calms me down, a terrifying, almost icy calm, like a frozen lake in winter, seemingly tranquil on the surface, yet with turbulent undercurrents beneath. I can't panic, can't act impulsively, can't be as defenseless as I was in my previous life. I started planning in my head. Step 1, figure out the situation. It's September 14th, and nothing has happened at my home yet. I need to confirm that my parents are still alive and that little bastard hasn't made a move. Step 2, gather evidence. I don't know how the police uncovered it in my past life, but that doesn't matter. This time, I'll take matters into my own hands and secure the evidence myself. Step 3, the most crucial step. I'm going to make them pay, not in a legal sense. I know all too well what can happen to a minor who poisons someone. Even if proven guilty, what kind of sentence can they get? A few years in juvenile detention, and they'll come out as lively as ever. And what about their parents? The law can't touch them. A slap on the wrist for poor supervision, a bit of compensation, an apology. Is that really a price to pay? No, that's just scratching the surface. The price I want is for their family to be ruined, for them to kneel before me and beg, but I won't show an ounce of mercy, for them to have nightmares every time they think of it, for them to be tormented by fear and regret in the dead of night, unable to sleep. That's what I call a price. I won't be a saint, nor will I use the excuse, he's just a child, to absolve anyone. Wang Xiaobao must bear the guilt of poisoning, and Wang Jiangwo and Lu Tsuefan must also bear the evil they allowed to grow. I got out of bed and walked over to the mirror. The person in the mirror looked no different, a thin, ordinary young girl's face, with slightly swollen eyes and pale lips, but I knew the person inside had changed. The girl inside had crawled back from hell. I washed my face, changed my clothes, and walked out of the room. My mom was making breakfast in the kitchen, eggs sizzling in the pan, the range hood humming. Hearing my footsteps, she glanced back at me. Awake, slept in so late. Did you stay up last night? I looked at her face, the fine wrinkles, the crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, her slightly dry lips, her hair tied in a casual ponytail, a few white strands at her temples, exactly the same as in my past life. I almost couldn't hold back my tears, but I did. I couldn't let her notice anything unusual. I had to let everything in these 2 weeks run as normally as it did in my past life. going to work as usual, eating as usual, without raising any suspicion. Yeah. I stayed up late watching a show last night. I walked over and hugged her from behind. She was startled for a moment, then smiled and tapped my hand with a spatula. How old are you? Still acting like a child. Go wake your dad up for breakfast. My dad was already sitting on the living room sofa, scrolling through his phone. He wore reading glasses, squinting as he refreshed the news. I walked over and sat beside him. Dad. I looked at him. His white hair, his slightly hunched back, the rough hand holding his phone. This man, in my previous life, had collapsed on the way to call an ambulance for my mom. Trying to get her phone, nothing much, just wanted to say hello. He shot me a glance, then went back to his phone, but the corner of his mouth twitched upward. I sat there, listening to the sizzling sounds from the kitchen, the rustling of my dad flipping through his phone. These sounds, which had vanished forever in my last life, were now right beside me. In my heart, I told myself, this time, no one will take them away from me. After breakfast, I left the house. My neighborhood was an old one. Tall buildings stood close together. The greenery wasn't great, but it was quiet. My apartment was on the first floor, and the Wang family lived right next door. I stood in the hallway, staring at their security door. The red Fu character pasted on it was frayed at the edges, dusty and faded. 2 pairs of slippers sat by the door, an adult pair and a child's, scattered haphazardly on the floor. I didn't knock. I just stood there for a moment, then turned and walked out of the building. I needed to reorganize the details about the Wang family. Wang Zhengwo worked as a long-haul truck driver for a local logistics company, spending most of his time on the road, rarely home for more than a few days a month. Lu Zuifan stayed at home raising their child, with no steady job, occasionally working part-time at the supermarket. Their son, Wang Xiaobao, was 2 years younger than me, but because he had repeated grades twice, he was in the same grade as me. This year, he should be in his second year of high school. That kid was notorious in our neighborhood. At 3, he dumped the goldfish that a neighbor had kept for 3 years into the washing machine, saying he wanted to see if fish could swim. At 5, he pressed every floor button in the elevator and then laughed as he ran away. At 7, he smashed the kitchen windows of several households on the ground floor with stones. After starting school, he was involved in fights, theft, and lying, never missing a chance. Every time something happened, Lu Zuifan would say the same thing: he's still a child. Why are you adults arguing with a child? Wang Zhengwo's attitude wasn't much better. Once, when a neighbor came to complain, he simply snapped, mind your own business, I'll handle my own child. Handle him, where Wang Xiaobao grew up under the protective shield of, he's just a child. He never faced any consequences for his misdeeds. His mother would shield him, and his father would take the blame for him. In this child's world, the word consequences simply didn't exist. So, when he felt that our family not letting him play with the iPad was an offense, what was his first instinct? To retaliate. And how did he retaliate? With the rat poison his mother bought to kill rodents. Did he know it could kill people? Maybe he did, or maybe he wasn't entirely sure, but for someone who had never faced consequences in his life, it didn't matter. What mattered was venting his anger. As for the consequences of that anger, no problem, his mother would handle it. I left the neighborhood and walked along the street. I knew this street all too well. I'd walked it countless times in my past life. The convenience store, the fruit stand, the hardware store, every shop was in the exact same place. I walked into an electronics store and bought a pinhole camera, the kind that connects to a phone for real-time viewing, with a wide-angle lens and high resolution. The shopkeeper asked which one I wanted, and I told him the one with the longest battery life and the clearest picture quality. He gave me an extra glance but didn't ask any questions. I paid, packed the device into my bag, and then headed to the wholesale herbal medicine market. I didn't buy rat poison. That's a controlled substance now and can't be obtained through regular channels. That wasn't what I was after anyway. I bought something else. Chinese herbs, the kind that calm the nerves and aid sleep, along with a few pungent spices. Individually, they're harmless, but when brewed together, they can cause drowsiness, nausea, and vomiting. This was my first gift for the Wang family. When I got home, I happened to run into Lu Zuifan heading out to buy groceries. She was wearing a floral short-sleeved shirt, her hair permed into small curls, with a cloth bag slung over her arm. Seeing me, she greeted me with a smile. "Xiao Xia, you're back. It's been a while since you've stayed here." Looking at her smile, a wave of nausea churned in my stomach. It was this exact smile, the same one She wore in front of the police in my past life, a smile that felt off in a way you couldn't quite pinpoint but made your skin crawl. Her mouth was smiling, but her eyes weren't, the corners of her eyes curved upward, yet there was no warmth in her pupils. I smiled back. Yes, Auntie, I'm back to spend some time with my parents these days. How filial, she said before walking away, her slippers slapping against the concrete floor. I stood there, watching her retreating figure. Her hair glistened greasily in the sunlight, and a patch at the back of her head was thinning, faintly revealing her scalp. I thought to myself, Lutzuafen, enjoy these 2 weeks of peace while you can. Back home, while my parents weren't in the living room, I installed the camera. I chose the location carefully, behind a decorative painting in the corner of the living room. The lens peered through a small hole in the painting, perfectly capturing the entire living room, especially the water dispenser. I connected the camera to my phone to test it. The image quality was excellent, and the angle was just right. From today onward, everything that happened in our living room would be recorded. In the evening, I went to the balcony to collect the laundry. The balcony was separated from the Wang family's next door by only a thin wall, and I could hear the sounds from over there. Lutzuafen was scolding Wang Xiaobao. I told you not to touch that thing, but you just had to. That was bought for your grandma. Why did you open it? I just wanted to see what's inside. Wang Xiaobao's voice was sharp and loud, full of confidence, with no hint of remorse. Then Wang Zhengwo's voice chimed in, muffled, as if he were lying on the sofa. Forget it, since it's already opened, we'll just buy another one. You're spoiling him. Lutzuafen muttered something back at him, but her tone had already softened. Then Wang Xiaobao spoke again, his voice carrying the arrogance unique to a spoiled child. I want KFC. All right, I'll take you after I finish cooking. I stood on the balcony, taking the clothes off the hangers one by one and folding them. My hands moved unhurriedly, but my ears caught every word from next door. A child who didn't need to apologize for ruining someone else's things, a father who said, forget it, and a mother who scolded but would still take him to KFC in the end. It was these three people who destroyed my entire family. I folded the last piece of clothing, turned around, and went back inside. After dinner, I took out the Chinese herbs I had bought and began processing them. I picked out the few pungent herbs separately and ground them into fine powder using a mortar. The color of the powder was no different from ordinary Chinese herb powder. It would be completely undetectable when mixed into food. Then I poured the powder into a sealed bag and tucked it into my bag. These things weren't meant to poison anyone. I'm not that foolish. Pungent herbs would, at most, make someone uncomfortable for a while, causing vomiting, diarrhea, dizziness, and nausea, but they'd recover after a few days of rest. But that was exactly the effect I wanted. Before that little brat from the Wang family could do anything to my family, I was going to create a little coincidence for him first. 2 days later, the neighborhood property management organized a homeowners potluck in the small square downstairs, with each household bringing a dish. Lutzuafen participated every year and especially loved showing off her sweet and sour spare ribs. This year, I planned to add a little seasoning to her sweet and sour spare ribs. This was just the beginning, the start of their streak of bad luck. They wouldn't know why they were suddenly so unlucky, why their child kept getting sick, or why things kept going wrong at home. They would simply think it was bad luck. By the time they truly realized what was happening, the net would already be tightening around them, and that packet of rat poison was still sitting quietly in their storage room. I took advantage of the daytime when Lutzuafen was out and Wang Xiaobao was at school to go check once. Their storage room was never locked, filled with old furniture, broken cardboard boxes, and a few packets of rat poison and cockroach killer. That packet of tetramine was placed on top of a cardboard box, opened, half-used, with the plastic bag casually tied, not even a proper knot. I stood in that storage room, staring at the packet, clutching a sealed bag of powdered Chinese medicine in my hand. A thought suddenly crossed my mind. I could easily replace that tetramine with something else, with flour, with powdered sugar, with anything harmless. That way, even if Wang Xiaobao came to poison my home, nothing would actually happen. But I didn't. I pushed that thought away, because if I swapped the poison, what he'd be throwing would be fake poison. Fake poison wouldn't kill anyone, but it also wouldn't become evidence that could seal their fate. In my past life, they escaped punishment by claiming the child was young and didn't know any better. If it was just fake poison this time, they'd be even more emboldened. No, I wanted him to throw real poison, and I wanted to capture the entire process clearly on camera. then intercept him before the poison entered my home. Yes. I had no intention of letting anyone in my family drink that poisoned water. The tragedy of my past life would not repeat itself for even a second in this one. My plan was simple and meticulous. First, the night before the incident, I would secretly replace the water in the drinking water bucket at home with purified water to ensure safety. Second, on the day of the incident, I would find an excuse to get my parents out of the house, like buying them movie tickets or having them visit relatives. In any case, they wouldn't be home that afternoon. Third, when Wang Xiaobao came to poison the water, I would be at home. I would hide in my room, watching the living room surveillance feed on my phone. Once he finished and left, I would immediately come out and preserve the bucket of poisoned water as evidence. Fourth, call the police. Fifth, before the police arrived, I would take the surveillance footage and knock on the Wang family's door. After these 5 steps, with both witnesses and evidence in place, they wouldn't be able to deny it. As for whether they would retaliate afterward, cause trouble, or try to settle privately, I had thought it all through. I wouldn't give them any opportunity. I put everything away, closed the storage room door, and returned to my own home. In the living room, my dad was watching TV, and my mom was picking vegetables beside him. The TV was playing the news, with the anchor speaking in standard Mandarin. My dad listened with half-closed eyes, occasionally muttering something. My mom snapped the green beans into pieces, tossing them into a basin with crisp, clear sounds. Everything is normal, everything is calm, but I know that beneath this calm, undercurrents have already begun to stir. From the moment I woke up, the gears of fate started turning in another direction. In my past life, I was the prey. In this life, I am the hunter. At 10:30 in the evening, my parents were already asleep. I returned to my room, turned off the light, sat on the bed, and opened the surveillance footage on my phone. The living room was pitch black, with only the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the window, casting a blurry patch of light on the floor. The water dispenser stood quietly in the corner, like a silent witness. I stared at the screen for a long time, then placed the phone beside my pillow, lay down, and closed my eyes. The images in my mind resurfaced: my mother's purplish face, my father's body slumped on the floor, the bloody marks my own fingers had clawed into the tiles, and the hunched backs of the 4 elderly people, collapsing one after another at my parents' and my funeral. In my past life, these images were nightmares, but in this life, they are the fuel that keeps me from showing mercy or hesitation. In another half-month, the family next door will learn what it means to pay a debt in blood. I turned over and felt the fruit knife under my pillow, the cold handle. Ever since I was reborn, I've slept like this every night. I know that before I send them to hell, I have to stay alive. September 20th, 10 days until that day. These past few days, I've been living with a heightened sense of clarity. The first thing I do every morning after waking up is reach for my phone to check the surveillance playback. The water dispenser stands quietly in the corner, and the living room shows only the shadows of curtains swaying in the breeze. Nothing has happened, but I can't let my guard down. The tragedy in my past life occurred on September 30th, but that was only the outcome. When did Wang Xiaobao start planning this lesson? When did he take that packet of rat poison from his family's storage room? I don't know any of this. The only thing I can do is remain vigilant every single day. These past few days, I did one more thing. I went to the bank and withdrew the tens of thousands of yuan I had saved, converting it into cash. Then I visited a travel agency and signed my parents up for a 2-day tour to a neighboring province, departing on September 29th and returning on October 1st. When my mom received the call, the travel agency told her she had won a free spot. She was overjoyed, humming songs in the kitchen all afternoon. In truth, there was no winning a spot. I paid for it myself, but I couldn't let them know. In their eyes, these past 2 weeks were just ordinary. Their daughter came home for the weekend, and they happened to win a travel prize. That's enough. On September 22nd, the residential property management organized a homeowners' dinner. Around 4 in the afternoon, the small square downstairs began bustling. The property management set up several long tables pushed together, covered with red disposable tablecloths, and set up 2 barbecue grills nearby, the charcoal burning brightly. Neighbors gradually came down from their apartments, each bringing 1 or 2 dishes, placing them noisily on the tables. Lu Tsuifan indeed brought her sweet and sour pork ribs. She placed the white soup pot on the table and announced loudly, "Come on, everyone, try my pork ribs. This recipe is new this year. I guarantee you've never tasted it before." Several elderly women gathered around, picking up pieces while praising her. Lu Tsuifen's face lit up with joy. I stood on the outskirts of the crowd, holding a plate of my mom's cold mixed 3-shredded salad, watching her expressionlessly. She picked up a pair of communal chopsticks from the table, took a piece of pork rib, and put it in her mouth, chewing noisily. Oil dripped from the corner of her mouth, and she wiped it with the back of her hand before reaching for a second piece. I stood outside the crowd, watching coldly. That afternoon, around 4:30, Lu Tsuifen went out to pick up Wang Xiaobao from school. When she left, she didn't even lock the front door, just left it slightly ajar. I stood at my own doorstep, listening as her footsteps faded at the corridor entrance. Not going in. In my previous life, that family destroyed our entire family. And I won't turn myself into the same poisoner. What I truly need to do is make everyone see their family's recklessness and the consequences of their evil. I told myself in my heart, I will personally bring them to the judgment bench, not send myself there. The evidence of the Wang family's wrongdoing hasn't appeared yet. I can't let hatred throw me off balance prematurely. Back at the gathering, Lu Tsuifen's smile began to stiffen after she had eaten 4 pieces of spare ribs. She rubbed her stomach, her face slightly pale, with fine beads of sweat forming on her forehead. Aunt Zhang beside her asked what was wrong, and she waved it off, saying, "It's nothing, maybe I ate too much at lunch." I stood nearby, picking up a bite of the cold mixed 3-shredded dish my mother had made, chewing it slowly. Half an hour later, Lu Tsuifen's forehead was drenched in sweat. Clutching her stomach, her mouth turned downward, she hurriedly said something to the person next to her and rushed toward the building. I watched her retreating figure as she ran into the unit entrance, hunched over, her steps short and frantic. Wang Jiangwo was drinking with a few men by the barbecue grill. Seeing his wife run off, he merely frowned before turning back to clink glasses with the others. Wang Xiaobao crouched nearby, gnawing on chicken wings, with 3 or 4 skewered on the bamboo stick in his hand, his mouth and hands greasy. I looked at the family of 3 and let out a cold laugh in my heart. This was their home, each person minding their own business. The wife went to the bathroom feeling unwell, the husband pretended not to notice, and the son was only focused on eating. They reserved all their coldness for outsiders, and for each other as well. Lu Tsuifen ran to the toilet 3 times that night, and later I heard she couldn't get out of bed the next day, vomiting and diarrhea, completely drained, her face yellow as wax. Wang Jiangwo was complaining to another neighbor in the hallway, saying she must have eaten something unclean. I happened to pass by them, didn't stop, and my lips curled up slightly. This was just the beginning. On September 25th, Lu Tsuifen had recovered from her illness, but she had lost a noticeable amount of weight, with her eye sockets sunken in. When she went out to buy groceries, her steps were unsteady, and she had to pause twice while carrying her shopping basket. I was watering the plants on the balcony when I saw her walking by downstairs. As she looked up, our eyes met, and I smiled at her. She managed to force a faint smile in return. "Auntie, are you feeling better?" I put down the watering can and leaned over the balcony railing, my tone so genuinely concerned that even I believed it. "Oh, much better, Lu Tsuifen replied, looking up at me, her voice still weak. "I must have eaten something bad. I had diarrhea for 3 days, almost felt like my insides were coming out. Take good care of yourself and drink some electrolyte water," I said with a smile. She nodded and slowly walked away. I picked up the watering can and continued tending to the flowers. The water washed away a shallow depression in the soil of the flower pot, and the excess flowed out through the hole at the bottom, dripping onto the concrete ground outside the first floor window. September 27th, 3 days away from that day. These past few nights, I haven't slept well, not out of fear, but from a heightened state of alertness. It felt like my entire body was on standby, ready to spring into action at any moment. The good news is that I've figured out the daily routines of the Wang family. Wang Jiangwo has recently gone on a long-distance trip again, taking about 5 days round trip. He won't be home on September 30th. Lu Tsuifen leaves for groceries around 9 a.m. every day and returns about an hour later. She picks up Wang Xiaobao from school at 4:30 p.m., and they return together around 5:30 p.m. The time after school is when Wang Xiaobao is most likely to cause trouble. In my previous life, he took advantage of this window, around 5 or 6 p.m., when it wasn't yet dark and families were busy cooking, to sneak into my house and pour rat poison into our drinking water bucket. At that time, everyone was in the kitchen, the living room was empty, and he could come and go in under 2 minutes, unnoticed. But this time, I won't let him succeed. On the evening of September 28th, after my parents fell asleep, I quietly got up and poured out more than half the water from the drinking bucket in the living room. Then I brought 2 5-liter bottles of purified water from the kitchen and refilled the bucket. This new water was clean and safe. I knew that, but Wang Xiaobao didn't. On the day he planned to poison the water, he would believe this was the water my family had been drinking all along, but before he could do it, I would change the water again, ensuring that the rat poison he added would dissolve into a bucket of water that no one would ever drink. That bucket of poisoned water would be the evidence. I crushed the empty purified water bottles, stuffed them at the bottom of the trash bag, covered them with other garbage, then washed my hands and returned to my room. Lying in bed, I reviewed my plan once more. The camera was installed and working properly. My parents would leave for their trip on the morning of September 29th, and they wouldn't be home when the Wang family acted on the afternoon of the 30th. I would claim illness and stay home on the afternoon of the 30th. Hiding in my room to monitor the entire process, trigger the alarm, and immediately call 110 once the evidence was solid. The plan was tightly linked. If any single step failed, everything would collapse, but I had no other choice. I only had one chance, and I had to succeed the first time. On the morning of September 29th, at 7 o'clock, my parents left with their suitcases. Before leaving, my mother knocked on my door. "Xia, we're off, remember to eat. There are frozen dumplings in the fridge. Lock the door when you go to bed tonight." I nodded and answered, standing at the door watching them get into a taxi. As the taxi passed through the community gate, my heart tightened. I remembered the times in my previous life when they had left, going to work, shopping, visiting relatives. Each time they left happily, only to never return. I took a deep breath and forced down the sour, aching feeling in my chest. This time would be different. This time, I would bring them back safely. September 30th. The alarm went off, and I opened my eyes. The first thing I did was reach for my phone to check the date. September 30th, Thursday. Today was the day. I sat on the bed, taking about 10 minutes to fully wake up, then stood and pulled open the curtains. Outside, it was overcast, gray, and gloomy, with clouds hanging low. The air carried a damp smell, as if rain was on the way. I changed my clothes and called the Academic Affairs office to request a sick leave, citing acute gastroenteritis and saying I couldn't make it to school today. The person on the other end didn't ask many questions, just told me to rest well. Then I made myself a cup of strong tea and sat on the living room sofa, sipping it slowly. The water in the dispenser had been replaced last night, clean and clear, shimmering with a faint blue tint under the overcast light. The living room was quiet, with only the wall clock ticking steadily. After finishing the tea, I washed the cup and placed it upside down on the drying rack. Then I returned to my room, leaving the door slightly ajar, just enough to hear any movement in the living room. I propped my phone on the nightstand, its screen displaying the surveillance feed. Every corner of the living room was clearly visible. The water dispenser stood quietly in the corner, like an emotionless witness. I turned the phone's brightness to the lowest setting, plugged in the charger to ensure it wouldn't run out of power at a critical moment, and then I waited. Waiting is the most torturous thing in the world. You know something will happen, but you don't know exactly when. You can only sit there, listening to your heartbeat. One by one, like counting down. At 4:30 in the afternoon, I saw Lu Zuifan leaving through a gap in the curtains. She was wearing a gray coat, carrying an umbrella in her hand, and heading toward the entrance of the residential complex, to pick up Wang Xiaobao from school. My heart began to beat faster, thumping heavily against my ribs. I took a deep breath and picked up the cup of tea that had long gone cold. Taking a sip, the tea was bitter, very bitter. At 5:10, footsteps echoed in the hallway, one light, one heavy. The light ones were the shuffling of Lu Zuifan's slippers, while the heavy ones were the dull thuds of Wang Xiaobao's sneakers on the terrazzo floor. Then came the sound of the Wang family's door opening, the jangling of keys for a moment, followed by the creak of the door swinging open and a loud slam as it shut. My heart beat even faster. Through the surveillance feed, the living room remained empty, the water dispenser still in its place. I picked up my phone and held it tightly in my hand, the screen showing a motionless image, like a static photograph. 5:20, 5:25, 5:30. Each minute felt like a year. At 5:34, the living room door, the front door of my house, made a faint sound. It wasn't a knock, nor the sound of a key turning in the lock. It was the sound of the doorknob being pressed down from the outside. I held my breath. The door wasn't locked. I had left it unlocked on purpose. My parents were away on a trip, and according to the rules, I was The only one at home, a person who had called in sick and was supposed to be sleeping, so the door wasn't locked from the inside. Anyone outside could simply twist the knob and walk in. The door opened a crack, then that face peeked in. Wang Xiaobao. He glanced left and right, confirming no one was in the living room, then squeezed his whole body through the gap. His movements were quiet, as if he had practiced them many times. He wasn't wearing shoes, just white socks, and he stepped onto the tiles of my living room without making a sound. On my phone screen, his figure was clearly reflected. There was an expression on his face I couldn't quite describe, not fear, not nervousness, but a kind of excitement, the peculiar elation that comes before doing something wrong. In his hand, he clutched something, a white plastic bag, crumpled. He opened the bag, revealing a small paper packet. Inside was a pale yellow powder, zinc phosphide. My eyes were glued to the screen, my fingers gripping the phone so tightly that the knuckles turned white. Wang Xiaobao walked to the water dispenser, glanced around again, then quickly poured the powder from the packet into the water tank. The pale yellow powder fell onto the surface of the water, spread out, and slowly sank. He crumpled the paper packet back into the plastic bag, shoved it into his pocket, then turned and slipped out of my front door with the same quiet steps he had used to enter. He gently closed the door with a soft click. The living room fell silent again, as if nothing had happened, except for the water tank. I sat on the bed, staring at my phone screen, motionless. My palms were drenched in sweat. I watched him come in, watched him pour it in, watched him leave. The whole process took less than 2 minutes. The surveillance footage captured every movement clearly. Front view, side view, the paper packet in his hand, the way he poured the powder into the water bucket, everything was in the frame, with no blind spots. This was evidence, irrefutable proof. I slowly stood up, my legs feeling a bit weak, not from fear, but from a powerful surge of emotions colliding inside me, anger, excitement, sorrow, and vindication, all mixed together, making my whole body tremble. I pushed open the door, walked to the living room, and stood beside that bucket of water. The water in the bucket was still clear, with nothing visible on the surface, but I caught a faint, bitter almond scent drifting from the water. Rat poison has a smell, though faint. If you pay close attention, you can detect a bitter almond-like odor. In my past life, my mom said the water tasted a bit bitter because of this. I took a step back, then another, before turning around and returning to my room to pick up my phone. The surveillance video had already been automatically saved to the cloud. I opened the playback and watched those 2 minutes again from start to finish. The footage was clear, the face recognizable, the movements seamless, and the timestamp accurate to the second. I backed up the video in 3 places, one in the cloud, one locally on my phone, and another I sent to an email only I knew about. Then, taking a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed the number, 110. The call was answered in less than 3 rings, the voice on the other end calm as they asked what the matter was. My voice was equally calm. Hello, I'd like to report a crime. Someone poisoned my home's water dispenser, and the entire process was caught on surveillance. The person who did it is the child of my neighbor. The operator paused for a moment, then their tone immediately shifted. What is your current address? Are you safe? Has anyone drunk from that bucket? I'm safe, and no one has been poisoned, but I have the complete surveillance footage. The person who did it is right next door. All right, ma'am, please keep your phone accessible. We'll dispatch officers immediately. After hanging up, I held my phone tightly, my palms sweating again. Then I did something the police might later consider inappropriate, but something I felt I had to do. I opened the door and walked over to the Wang family's house next door. I didn't knock. I had copied the surveillance video onto a USB drive, which was plugged into my phone, ready to show them at any moment. Then I knocked on the door 3 times, not too lightly, not too heavily. Lu Tsuifan opened the door. She was wearing a floral apron, holding a spatula in her hand, with the lingering scent of cooking oil on her face. Seeing it was me, she paused for a moment, then reflexively forced out that familiar smile. Xiaoxia, what's wrong? Is something the matter? Aunt Tsuifan, there's something I'd like to discuss with you and your son. What is it? I'm in the middle of cooking, maybe later. Have Wang Xiaobao come over too? My tone was flat, but each word felt like a nail, hammering into the smile on her face. Her smile froze, lingering for 2 seconds before slowly fading, a hint of wariness appearing in her eyes. What happened to Xiaobao? Did he cause trouble again? She didn't ask, what do you want, first, but rather, did Xiaobao cause trouble again? That, again, was perfectly chosen. Call him out. let the three of us talk together. Lu Zuifan stared at me for a few seconds, then turned and shouted into the house, Xiaobao, come out here. A few seconds later, Wang Xiaobao shuffled out in slippers, still holding his phone and playing a game. He looked up and saw me standing at the door. A flicker of guilt crossing his face, just a flicker, gone in an instant, before it was replaced by his usual defiant expression. What do you want? He asked, not even bothering to call me sister. I looked at him, then at Lu Zuifan, and turned the phone screen around, opening the video. In the footage, Wang Xiaobao pushed the door open, walked to the water dispenser, and poured the powder from the paper packet into it. Lu Zuifan's face shifted from confusion to shock, from shock to pale, then to an expression I couldn't quite describe, mixed with fear and anger. Wang Xiaobao's game was still running, and the phone emitted crackling sound effects, but his expression had changed. What is this? Lu Zuifan's voice was dry, as if someone had grabbed her by the throat. Just now, I said, only 5 minutes ago, your son sneaked into my house and poured something into my water bucket. Would you like to guess what he poured? Lu Zuifan abruptly turned to look at Wang Xiaobao. Wang Xiaobao took a step back, nearly dropping his phone. The defiant expression on his face had completely shattered, revealing the panic underneath of someone who had never faced consequences. It was a mistake, child, I didn't. He's lying. Was that you in the video? I asked him, my voice soft. He opened his mouth but couldn't speak. The muscles in Lu Zuifan's face trembled. She looked at me, then at the phone screen, then at her son. Her mouth drooped, her lips moving slightly as if she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Then she made a gesture I would never forget for the rest of my life. She reached out and pushed her son behind her, just like in the last life. Her body blocked Wang Xiaobao, her chin lifted, and when her eyes met mine, the panic and fear were gone, replaced by a too familiar, practiced, almost instinctive response. This must be a misunderstanding. Xiaobao might just be joking with you. Kids don't know what's appropriate. I raised my hand to stop her. Don't say anything, wait until the police come, you can tell them. Lu Zuifan's face turned completely pale, a sickly gray undertone creeping in. She opened her mouth, the spatula in her hand fell to the ground with a clatter, oil splashing everywhere. You called the police. I didn't answer her, I just put my phone away and turned to walk back. Behind me, Lu Zuifan's voice rang out, sharp, hysterical, almost a scream. Who gave you the right to call the police? He's still a child, he doesn't know any better. What kind of adult are you, arguing with a child? I stopped in my tracks, then I turned around and looked at her. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, her apron splattered with oil, her hair disheveled, her expression less one of anger than of panic, because she knew this time was different. This wasn't about breaking a window, or throwing a cup, or a fight. This was poisoning, a criminal offense. The surveillance footage had captured it. Her old, decade-long shield, the child doesn't know any better, might not protect her this time. Aunt Zuifan, I said, looking at her, word by word, I just turned 18 not long ago. In terms of age, I'm not much older than him, but I know one thing, I've known it since I was a child. The motion sensor light in the hallway went out, leaving only the light seeping through the gaps of 2 doors, illuminating the 3 of us. Half of Lu Zuifan's face was lit, the other half in shadow, her expression frozen like a cracked mask. Wang Xiaobao hid behind her, only one hand visible, his fingers gripping the hem of his mother's apron. I looked into his eyes and finished the last sentence. Before a beast bites, the owner never thinks its teeth are sharp. The motion sensor light flicked on with a snap. Lu Zuifan's face turned as pale as paper in the light. Then I turned and walked into my own house, closing the door behind me. The hallway outside fell silent for about 3 seconds, then Lu Zuifan's voice exploded, not at me, but at her son. What on earth did you pour into her bucket? Tell me. This was followed by Wang Xiaobao's crying, that sharp, self-righteous, spoiled child wail that comes when being scolded. Not an apology, but a cry of grievance. I just wanted to teach her a lesson. That stuff won't kill anyone. I leaned against the door and closed my eyes. It won't kill anyone. In my previous life, my family of 3, along with 4 elderly relatives, all because of his words, it won't kill anyone. My fingers clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms, leaving marks, but I didn't open the door to go out, because I knew the police were already on their way. The real battle was about to begin. The police arrived quickly. Less than 10 minutes after I hung up the phone, the sound of sirens came from downstairs. Not the piercing kind, just a brief blare before it fell silent. 2 police cars stopped at the entrance of the building, their red and blue lights spinning in the dim evening sky, casting flickering shadows on the building's exterior. Through the peephole, I saw 3 police officers enter the hallway. The one leading was a middle-aged man in his 40s, wearing a dark blue uniform with a walkie-talkie on his belt. His expression was calm, clearly an experienced officer who had dealt with many such situations. Following him were 2 younger officers, a man and a woman, carrying briefcases and a silver evidence box. I opened the door and stood waiting for them in the doorway. A few people had already gathered in the hallway. Aunt Zhang from upstairs leaned over the stair railing to look down, while Uncle Chen from across the hall cracked his door open and peeked out. The Wang family's door remained tightly shut, but I could hear faint voices and a woman sobbing inside. "Did you call the police?" the middle-aged officer asked as he approached me, giving me a quick once-over. "Yes, I did." "What's the situation?" "You said someone poisoned your water dispenser." "That's right." I took out my phone, opened the surveillance video, and handed it to him. "About 20 minutes ago, the neighbor's child sneaked into my house and poured an unknown powder into my water dispenser. The whole thing was caught on my living room surveillance camera. The water dispenser is still in the living room, untouched." The middle-aged police officer took the phone and carefully watched the video. His frown deepened as he watched, and after finishing, he passed the phone to the female officer beside him. She also watched it, and both of their expressions turned serious. "You said this child is your neighbor?" The middle-aged officer pointed at the door of the Wang family's house. "Yes, he lives right next door. His name is Wang Xiaobao, and he should be 17 this year. His parents are at home too. I've already informed them about the report." "Did anyone in your family drink that bucket of water?" "No, I reported it immediately after discovering it. No one drank it. My parents are away on a trip these days, so I'm the only one at home." The middle-aged police officer nodded, his expression slightly relaxing. No one had been poisoned, so this wasn't a homicide, and the nature of the case was completely different. But he quickly became serious again. Attempted poisoning is still a serious crime, especially with such clear video evidence. "Chen, go get a sample of that bucket of water." "Wang, go to the next door and bring the person involved out." The 2 young officers split up. The female officer put on gloves, carried the evidence box into my living room, walked to the water dispenser, and carefully used a pipette to collect a sample from the bucket. The male officer walked to the Wang family's door and knocked 3 times. No one answered. He knocked again, more forcefully. The door opened. It wasn't Lu Zuifan who opened it, but Wang Jiangwo. I was stunned. When had he come back? According to my earlier calculations, he should still be on a long-distance trip and wouldn't return until the day after tomorrow. But here he stood in front of me, wearing a wrinkled gray t-shirt, his hair messy, and his face showing the fatigue and greasy look of long-distance driving. Clearly, he had rushed back overnight after receiving Lu Zuifan's call. Wang Jiangwo's gaze passed over the young officer's shoulder and landed directly on me. That look was impossible to describe accurately. It wasn't anger, nor fear, but something like, "How could you do this?" A sense of injustice, as if I had done something wrong to him. He stared at me for 2 seconds, then turned to the police, forcing a smile, one that was exactly the same as the one Lu Zuifan had forced when her son Wang Xiaobao had done something wrong and faced the neighbors. "Officers, this must be a misunderstanding. The child is just being mischievous, playing around. Don't take it seriously. You are Wang Xiaobao's father." The middle-aged officer interrupted him, his tone calm. Yes, I am." "Officers, can we go inside and talk? There are so many people in the hallway watching. This isn't good." "No need to go inside." The middle-aged officer stepped forward, standing beside me, facing Wang Jiangwo. "Now we have surveillance video showing your son entered someone else's home without permission and placed an unknown substance into the drinking water. We need your son to come with us to the police station for questioning. Please ask him to come out." Wang Jiangwo's smile froze on his face, his lips twitching slightly, the frustration in his eyes turning into panic. "He's only 17, still a child. You can't." 17 falls within the scope of criminal responsibility, the middle-aged police officer replied calmly. "Please cooperate." The words felt like a bucket of cold water poured over him from head to toe. Wang Jiangwo stood rooted to the spot, his lips moving as if trying to speak, but no words came out. Behind him, Lu Zuifan appeared in the doorway, her eyes red and tear stains covering her face. She clutched the edges of her apron tightly, her knuckles turning white. "My son didn't poison anyone. that video is fake, she forged it, Lu Zuifan suddenly shrieked, her voice sharp and piercing, startling the motion sensor lights in the hallway into flickering on. The middle-aged officer ignored her, keeping his gaze fixed on Wang Jiangwo. Please bring your son out. If you refuse to cooperate, we will have to enter your residence by law. Wang Jiangwo's facial muscles twitched a few times, and finally he turned and shouted into the house, Xiaobao, come out. After a long while, Wang Xiaobao finally emerged slowly from the inner room. He kept his head down, afraid to look at anyone, his previously defiant expression completely gone, replaced by an almost instinctive cowering, like a mouse cornered against a wall, his eyes darting around, hands unsure where to place. The male police officer stepped forward, his tone still relatively polite, but his hand already resting on Wang Xiaobao's shoulder. Young man, come with us for a statement. I'm not going. Wang Xiaobao suddenly exploded, violently shaking off the officer's hand, stepping back 2 paces, and retreating behind his mother. Mom, I'm not going. I didn't poison anyone. That video is fake. Officer, did you hear that? Lu Zuifan clung to her son like a lifeline. She said he didn't poison it. You can't wrong a child like this. The middle-aged police officer sighed. I noticed a hint of impatience in his expression, the kind of weariness that comes from seasoned grassroots officers who've seen this kind of scene too many times. Whether or not poison was involved, we'll know once we check the video at the police station. Right now, you're blocking us, and that only makes things worse. Your son is a minor. If he cooperates and shows a good attitude, the court will take that into consideration. There was a crucial piece of information in that sentence. I didn't know if Wang Jiangwo and Lu Zuifan understood it. The middle-aged officer had already classified the incident. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute, not a public security matter, but a criminal case, one that would go to trial. Lu Zuifan's face turned completely white. She was trembling, clutching Wang Xiaobao's hand, her lips quivering, tears welling up in her eyes and finally spilling down. This wasn't the kind of hysterical, performative crying. This was genuine, wordless tears born of sheer terror. Jiangwo, think of something, think of something. Wang Jiangwo stood there, his face ashen, saying nothing, his hands hung at his sides, clenching into fists, then loosening again, then clenching tightly. After a long while, he finally spoke. First, cooperate with the police. I'll go with you. He didn't look at me once, not even once, as if by avoiding my gaze, I simply didn't exist. And the whole thing had never happened. The police led Wang Xiaobao out of the corridor. Lu Zuifan followed behind, still wearing her apron and slippers. Wang Jiangwo walked last, pausing briefly as he passed by me. I could feel his gaze fall on me, but I didn't turn to look at him. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, staring straight ahead. After about 3 seconds, his footsteps resumed, growing fainter and fainter in the corridor. The neighbors who had gathered in the hallway began to disperse. As Aunt Zhang passed by me, she lowered her voice and said, "That kid really needs someone to discipline him." Then she hurried upstairs. I closed the door and returned to the living room. The female officer had already collected the water sample from the drinking bucket, filling 3 small sealed bottles and labeling them. She packed the items into the evidence box, stood up, and handed me a form. This is the sampling record. Keep it safe. We'll contact you later. There may be a need for you to provide the complete surveillance footage as evidence. We won't take your phone for now, but we recommend you save the original video yourself. Don't delete it or edit it. I nodded and said I understood. Also, she glanced at me, her tone softer than before. Be careful when you're home alone. Even though the suspect has been taken away, you still live in the same building. Call us anytime if anything happens. Thank you, I said. I'll be careful. I saw the officers off and locked the door. Then I walked over to the drinking bucket, staring at the one from which the sample had been taken. The water level had dropped slightly, about the amount of 2 mineral water bottles had been drawn out. A thin layer of fine dust floated on the surface, the residue left behind after the rat poison powder dissolved. I bent down and leaned in to smell it. The faint, bitter almond scent was still there, subtle, but unmistakably real. This was the poison that had nearly claimed the lives of my entire family. In my previous life, my mother, my father, and I had died from this bucket of water. And in this life, it had become evidence. I straightened up, stood in the middle of the living room for a while, then began to laugh, softly, almost silently, a sound that seemed to come from deep in my throat, but tears welled up and spilled down my cheeks, dripping into my mouth, salty and bitter. I did it, I really did it. the video was recorded, the police arrived, and the person was taken away. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had planned, but I couldn't celebrate too soon, because I knew this was only the first step. Wang Xiaobao was indeed caught in the act. But he was a minor. In practice, a minor attempting poisoning wouldn't receive a heavy sentence. If his family hired a good lawyer and argued the case as a prank, no malicious intent, poor family education, the outcome might be just a short stay in a juvenile detention center, or even just community correction. As for Lu Cuifan and Wang Jiangwo, in the previous life, not even a single hair on their bodies was harmed. Even if Wang Xiaobao ended up in jail this time, they could still live comfortably, maybe just move to another city and start over, burying this incident in their memories until it faded away. But that wasn't the result I wanted. I wanted every single member of their family to pay the price. My plan was far from over. That night, I sat alone in the living room, going over the next steps in my mind once again. The surveillance footage had already served its purpose, but its value wasn't exhausted yet. I needed to let more people see it. Not the police, not the judges, but everyone. The next day was October 1st, National Day. It was supposed to be a day for family reunions, but the Wang household next door was as quiet as a tomb. I couldn't hear Wang Xiaobao running and jumping inside, nor could I hear Lu Cuifan's loud scolding, nor the rumble of Wang Jiangwo's truck starting up. Around 10 in the morning, while hanging clothes on the balcony, I saw a police car parked downstairs. 2 people in uniforms got out and walked into the building. A few minutes later, I heard knocking at the door, then Lu Cuifan opening it and speaking in a low voice to the police. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I could guess roughly. It was probably the criminal investigation team coming to do a scene inspection, or to inform the Wang family of some procedural matters. Sure enough, in the afternoon, I heard Lu Cuifan on the phone in the hallway. She probably thought no one could hear, so she kept her voice low, but the echo in the corridor was too good. I could hear every word clearly from behind the door. Don't hire a lawyer, let me tell you, hire the best lawyer. Money isn't an issue, that family just wants to extort us. The surveillance video must be fake. Videos these days can all be faked. I leaned against the door, listening with a cold sneer. Video forgery, go ahead, hire a lawyer, find an expert to verify it. That surveillance footage was recorded directly from my home camera. The sequence was seamless, unedited, with timestamps and cloud storage records perfectly aligned. Any professional forensic agency could confirm it. It was 100% authentic footage, but she was right about one thing: money wasn't an issue. Although Wang Jiangwo's long-haul driving was tough, his income was decent. Plus, after living here for over a decade, they still owned a house back in their hometown. Scraping together a few $100,000 for a lawsuit wouldn't be difficult, if they really decided to pour money into hiring lawyers and pulling strings. This lawsuit might not turn out the way I wanted, so I couldn't rely solely on the law. The law could punish Wang Xiaobao, but it couldn't punish his parents, and in my heart, they were the real culprits. On October 2nd, the day after Wang Xiaobao was taken away, the news had already spread throughout the neighborhood. When I went downstairs to buy something at the small grocery store, the shopkeeper grabbed me and started asking questions, her eyes shining as if she had discovered a new world. Oh my goodness, let me tell you, I've long suspected something was wrong with that kid. Last year he stole soy sauce from my shelf, and when I confronted his mother, she said I was stingy and too petty to argue with a child. Now look at this, poisoning, that's life-threatening. I bought my items, paid, and smiled without saying much. The news was spreading faster than I had anticipated. By the afternoon, several people on WeChat had messaged me asking if something had happened in our neighborhood. One person even sent me a link to a post on a local forum. I clicked on it and saw a post from an anonymous user titled, "Shocking, high school student in a certain neighborhood poisons neighbor's water dispenser." Video captures entire incident. The post was brief but contained all the key details: neighbor's child, water dispenser, poisoning, surveillance footage, police arrived, person taken away. The comments below had already scrolled through more than 10 pages. A minor, kids these days are terrifying. Where's the mother? Parents should be responsible for such things. If this is true, it's already criminal liability. That kind of child should be locked up for reflection. Once released, they'll just be a menace to society. Why are you blaming the child? The root lies with the adults. You get the kind of child you raise. I scrolled through the comments one by one, feeling calm. I hadn't posted that thread. It must have been a neighbor who knew the inside story or a leak from the police. but for my plan, this was an unexpected boost. Public opinion is like a snowball, you just need to push it down the slope, and it will roll on its own, growing bigger and bigger. I took a screenshot of the post and saved it, along with the comments below. On the morning of October 3rd, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. A man's voice, probably in his 40s, introduced himself as the lawyer hired by Wang Xiaobao's family, and said he wanted to talk to me. Talk about what? The case, as it stands now, is still considered a minor's negligent act. My client hopes to reach a settlement. After all, we're neighbors, close quarters, you know, going to court would be bad for everyone. What are the terms of the settlement? My client is willing to compensate you for emotional distress and promises to discipline the child more strictly in the future. We can discuss the exact amount. Mr. Yen, I interrupted, having looked up his name beforehand. He was Yen Jiangwo, a criminal defense lawyer with over a decade of experience in the local area. Before you go on, have you seen the surveillance video? There was a 2-second pause on the other end, then he said, yes, I have. Then you should know that Wang Xiaobao's actions were not negligence. They were intentional. He had pre-prepared rat poison in his hand, slipped into my house when I wasn't paying attention, and poured the poison into my water dispenser. Do you call that negligence? Legally speaking, the classification of juvenile delinquency still. There's one more piece of information I think you should know. I cut him off before he could finish. The rat poison Wang Xiaobao used was taken from his own home. There's still half a pack in his family's storage room, same type as the one he poured into the water dispenser. The police have already taken samples for testing. The results of the chemical comparison should be available soon. I paused, letting him absorb the information, then continued, you're an experienced lawyer, you know better than I do. What does it mean when a 17-year-old minor commits a home invasion poisoning, caught on surveillance, with complete physical evidence? The silence on the other end of the phone stretched longer. Finally, lawyer Yen Jiangwo's voice dropped slightly, losing some of its smoothness and gaining a note of caution. So you mean, you're not willing to settle? I'm willing, I said. He paused, clearly unprepared for my response. But my conditions, you can't decide. Let Wang Jiangwo and Lu Zuifan come talk to me themselves. Kneel down and talk to me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, the lawyer said, I'll pass it on to them, and hung up. I put down my phone and stood up, walking to the window. The sky outside was gray, the clouds low and heavy, the trees in the neighborhood swayed in the wind, and the ground was covered with fallen dry leaves. A few children were running and playing downstairs, their laughter bright and clear. I watched them, thinking, every child is born with a blank slate. Who drew all the evil on Wang Xiaobao's blank slate? It was them. It was their countless acts of indulgence and protection, each stroke turning a child into a murderer. So their children must be punished, and they themselves cannot escape. At 2 in the afternoon, I went to the police station. The middle-aged officer, whose name I now knew was Gao, the deputy chief of this district, received me in his office. He poured me a cup of water, then sat down and flipped through the files in front of him. We've reviewed all the surveillance footage. Technically, there's no issue. The toxicology report on the water sample has come back, confirmed as tetramine, combined with Wang Xiaobao's own confession in the statement. He admitted to poisoning. My heart skipped a beat. Had he admitted it? He admitted it. Deputy Chief Gao closed the file, took off his glasses, and rubbed his brow, but he said it wasn't intentional. He claimed he just wanted to scare you, thought the powder was just something to make your stomach hurt. In other words, he denies the intent to kill. I almost laughed out loud. Something to make your stomach hurt? A 17-year-old high school student doesn't know tetramine, doesn't know it's poison. Do you believe that? Deputy Chief Gao glanced at me. He didn't answer the question, but his eyes had already answered. Anyway, the current evidence is sufficient to file a case. A minor poisoning, even if attempted, is of serious nature. The next step will be to transfer it to the procuratorate for review and prosecution. What about his parents? Deputy Chief Gao paused, probably around 55, with graying hair and deep wrinkles on his face, clearly a veteran officer who had spent decades working in the grassroots. Such people see people clearly and understand the ways of the world better than anyone else. His mother cried at the station all day. His father called everywhere, trying to find connections and hire a lawyer. You know the routine. He lifted his teacup and took a sip, his tone as calm as if he were commenting on the weather. Some people, before trouble happens, walk around with their heads held high. Once something happens, they start pretending to be pitiful. I've seen too many like that in my life. Chief Gao, I'd like to ask you a question. go ahead, if, just hypothetically, I chose not to settle, refused compensation, and insisted on pressing charges, what would the case likely end up with? Chief Gao didn't answer right away. He set his teacup down on the table, his fingers slowly tracing the rim, thinking for a long moment. It would depend on how the procuratorate and the court assess it. If they find the poisoning charge established, even if it was an attempted crime, it's a serious offense, with a minimum sentence of 3 years, considering the perpetrator is a minor and has confessed voluntarily. The sentence might be reduced, but I'd estimate he won't escape a year or 2 in a reformatory. What about his parents? Chief Gao shook his head. The law can't punish them for poor parenting, unless we can prove they incited him. He didn't finish, but the meaning was clear. The law couldn't touch them, but I could. Leaving the police station, it was nearly dark. Streetlights flickered on, casting rings of light on the pavement. I walked down the street, passing the electronics store. The TV in the window was showing the news. I stopped and looked at the screen. The report was about a local social incident, a middle-aged woman kneeling on the ground, sobbing. The subtitle read, "Parent of suspect in local poisoning case kneels to beg for settlement." My heart skipped a beat, but on closer inspection, this wasn't the Wang family's case. It was another incident, but it gave me an idea. I went home, turned on my phone, and found the post on the local forum. The comments below had grown even more numerous. Some people claiming to be from the same neighborhood had added details in the comments section, though Wang Xiaobao's name wasn't exposed. Descriptions like, "that spoiled kid," and, "his mom always says the child is young, doesn't understand," were enough for anyone who knew him to recognize the reference. The public opinion snowball was rolling, but it wasn't enough. I needed to add fuel. I found the screenshot of the surveillance video in my phone's photo album, the most crucial one, Wang Xiaobao holding a paper packet of powder, pouring it out, with a small ripple spreading across the surface of the water in the drinking bucket. His face was clearly visible in the frame, and the action was captured at the most critical moment. I posted this screenshot along with text on my social media feed. The text read, "My neighbor's child sneaked into my house while I was away and poisoned the drinking water bucket. It was caught on surveillance, and the police have already filed a case." His mother said, "He's just a child and doesn't know any better," and tried to settle it privately with money. I refused. I want to ask everyone, if your water dispenser was poisoned, would you choose to forgive? Within half an hour of posting, the comments section exploded. Classmates, colleagues, friends, and even people I rarely interacted with all left comments. Some said it was terrifying, others asked which neighborhood it was. Some insisted it absolutely shouldn't be settled privately, and some directly shared the post from the local forum into group chats. I saw the grade-level group admin post the screenshot in the parents group. Then, the school erupted. A teacher from the academic affairs office called to ask about the situation, saying the school was already holding a meeting to discuss the matter. I set my phone to silent and put it aside. These reactions were all within my expectations. I know the rules of how this society operates all too well. Some things, if you don't make a big fuss, will be suppressed, handled behind closed doors, settled privately, and forgotten. But once something has spread online, reached the school, and become known to everyone, no one can suppress it anymore. The Wang family wants to settle privately. Too late. From the very beginning, there was never an option for a private settlement. At 11 p.m., I lay in bed scrolling through my phone. The social media post already had over 100 likes and nearly 1,000 comments. Some people privately messaged me asking if I needed help, saying they knew lawyers. Others sent messages saying their child was in the same class as Wang Xiaobao, and that the kid often bullied others in class. Someone should have dealt with him long ago. I replied to each one, then put down my phone and turned off the light. In the darkness, I stared at the crack on the ceiling, thinking about what would come next. According to my plan, the public opinion storm was just the first step. The second step was to drag Lu Zuifan and Wang Zhangwo into this. I still had one card left to play. That day in the storage room, I took a few photos with my phone. The photos showed the half-empty packet of rat poison, placed on top of a cardboard box, with the brand and product name clearly visible. There was also a full view of the storage room, old furniture piled haphazardly, insecticides and rat poison casually stored in an unlocked, open space. These were things a 17-year-old could easily get their hands on, if one day this surveillance footage, along with these photos, appeared in court. Even the best lawyer the Wang family could hire would be useless, because this case isn't just a child's prank, it's the inevitable result of a severe lack of family education, and the responsibility for family safety education lies with the parents, but I don't plan to hand these photos over to the police. I intend to give them to the media, right now. The situation is at the center of public attention, if I release the photos. At this moment, how will the media write about it? Behind the poisoning case, why could rat poison be easily accessed by minors? Behind the child's poisoning, a decade of parental indulgence and neglect. I can imagine headlines like these, spreading like wildfire on local news public accounts, racking up hundreds of thousands of reads. By then, Wang Jiangwo and Lu Tsuifan won't be able to hide. They'll become the city's most despised examples, their names, photos, and workplaces all exposed. Would Wang Jiangwo's logistics company allow the father of a poisoner to continue driving long distance? Would the supermarket where Lu Tsuifan occasionally works part-time dare to keep her, even if Wang Xiaobao gets out of juvenile detention? Would any school dare to take him? This isn't punishment the law can deliver, it's the cruelest punishment society can give, social death, and that's exactly what I want. I closed my eyes, ready to sleep. There was still a lot to do tomorrow too. Days passed after that phone call, and there hadn't been much movement from the Wang family. I did hear that Wang Xiaobao had been transferred from the police station to a detention center, awaiting approval for arrest from the procuratorate. As for exactly where he was being held, I didn't ask and didn't care. A caged beast didn't need my attention for now. The ones I had to deal with were the two outside. October 6th, the last day of the National Day holiday. I was walking back from the supermarket to my apartment building when I saw a silver-gray Buick parked downstairs. The car door was open, and Wang Jiangwo was lifting a large cardboard box from the back seat, likely clothes and daily necessities for his son in the detention center. Lu Tsuifan stood beside him, holding a few plastic bags, her face expressionless. She had lost a lot of weight. In just a few days, her cheekbones had become prominent, her eye sockets sunken, making her look at least 10 years older. She wore a dark coat, her hair tied loosely in a low ponytail, with a few stray strands sticking to the corners of her mouth, her lips dry and cracked. When she saw me, she paused, the plastic bags swaying in her hand, making faint rustling sounds. Her expression was complex, a mix of hatred, fear, and something else I couldn't quite place, like the air had been let out of her, like a balloon suddenly punctured, deflating with a soft hiss. Wang Jiangwo also noticed me. He set the cardboard box on the ground, straightened up, his face even gloomier than a few days ago, with heavy, dark eye bags and a stubbly beard on his chin. It seemed he hadn't been getting much sleep lately. I ignored them and walked straight into the building. Wait a minute, Wang Jiangwo's voice came from behind, no angry shout, but a low, suppressed tone, as if forced out between clenched teeth. I stopped, not turning around. Are you satisfied now? His footsteps drew closer, stopping about 2 meters behind me. My son's in jail. The school called saying he might be expelled. For days, our whole family hasn't dared to leave the house. My phone is flooded with all kinds of messages. Are you satisfied now? I turned to face him. He looked even more haggard than before. Last time I saw him was that evening when the police came to take someone, and though he was exhausted from rushing back overnight, there was still a fierce, defiant glint in his eyes. Now that fire had mostly faded, replaced by a murky mix of anger and helplessness. Uncle Wang, I said, using the same tone as always. You're making it sound like I'm the one who ruined your family, isn't it? Lu Tsuifan suddenly exploded, slamming her plastic bag to the ground and storming forward. Her eyes were red, bloodshot, her face trembling. You installed cameras, you called the police, you posted the video online. Did you plan this all along? You just wanted to ruin our Xiaobao. Tsuifan, Wang Jiangwo grabbed her arm, but Lu Tsuifan struggled like a madwoman, pointing her trembling finger at my nose. He's only 17, he's still a child. Do you know you've ruined his whole life? More people in the hallway were peeking out to watch the scene. Windows on the 3rd floor were open. 2 people stood on the 4th floor balcony. This is how our neighborhood is. Poor sound insulation, little privacy. If anything happens in one household, the whole neighborhood knows about it within 10 minutes. I looked at Lu Tsuifan's contorted face, my mind calm. Aunt Lu, I ruined his whole life. My voice was soft, so soft only she and Wang Jiangwo could hear. Then do you know what dose of rodenticide your son poured into the water dispenser? Enough to kill a family of 3, with plenty left over. If I hadn't discovered it in time, my parents and I would be lying in the morgue now. Then, would you also stand in front of the police and say, he's still a child. Lu Tsuifen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Where were you when your son poisoned the water? I took a step forward, now just one step away from her. You were cooking, your husband was watching TV on the sofa, your son took the rodenticide you bought and sneaked into my house to poison it, while you two were just one wall away, completely unaware. Is that what you call parenting? That's negligence. Wang Jiangwo's expression changed, not the kind of change that comes from anger, but the kind that comes from being hit where it hurts. His grip on Lu Tsuifen's hand loosened slightly, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. I've been thinking about something these past few days, I continued, shifting my gaze from Lu Tsuifen's face to Wang Jiangwo's and then back again. Did Wang Xiaobao poison my family because he was born bad, or was it something you two instilled in him? The air was quiet for about 5 seconds, then, as if suddenly realizing something, Lu Tsuifen abruptly raised her head, staring at me intently. Her lips moved, and she squeezed out a sentence, one I hadn't expected at all. We're willing to pay compensation, any amount, as long as you're willing to sign the letter of understanding. We'll pay whatever it takes. As she said this, the hatred in her eyes remained, but her mouth had already taken on a posture of concession. That posture was all too familiar to me, just like every time she had apologized for her son in the past, saying, "I'm sorry," with her mouth, but her eyes saying, "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" I looked at her and suddenly felt exhausted, not physically tired, but a weariness that welled up from the depths of my soul. How much do you think a human life is worth? Your son's future is valuable, but the lives of my family of 3 aren't. Is that right? She didn't answer, but I saw the answer in her expression. To her, there were only 2 kinds of people in the world, her son and everyone else. Her son's future was the most important thing in the world, while other people's lives were merely bargaining chips for her. Suddenly, I didn't want to talk to her anymore. Talking to her was like pouring water into sand. No matter how much you pour, it just seeps away, never filling up. I won't sign the letter of understanding, and don't come looking for me again. I turned around and walked into the building. Just you wait. Lu Tsuifen's voice exploded behind me, sharp and piercing. Do you think you can keep my son locked up for long? I've hired the best lawyer. My son is a minor. At most, he'll be locked up for a year or 2, and then he'll be out. Let's see how you handle it then. I didn't look back, and my steps didn't falter. Once inside, I closed the door, shutting out those voices. Leaning against the door, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I actually knew all about what she said. The lawyer she hired was Yan Jiangwo, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the city, and his fees weren't cheap. Wang Jiangwo had even listed his family's old house with an agency to sell it and raise money for the legal fees. I pieced this information together from various sources, neighbors' gossip, casual chats with property management, and subtle clues in social media posts. If they really invested heavily, and considering Wang Xiaobao was a first-time offender, a minor, and the poisoning was attempted rather than successful, these mitigating factors could indeed lead to a suspended sentence or less than a year in a juvenile detention center. But that was without public opinion getting involved, and the card I held in my hand hadn't been played yet. That evening, I sat in front of the computer and organized all the materials I had. The first item was the photos of the half-empty packet of rat poison in the storage room. I took these photos on the afternoon of September 17th. That day, Lu Tsuifen had gone out to pick up Wang Xiaobao from school, and the door to the storage room was unlocked, so I went in and took the pictures. The photos showed the dust on the cardboard box, the product name and logo on the rat poison packaging, and the overall lack of any safety measures in the storage room. The second item was the surveillance screenshots of Wang Xiaobao poisoning the water dispenser. I extracted 3 of the clearest frames from the surveillance footage, him entering the room, opening the paper packet, and pouring the powder into the water dispenser, each frame clearly showing his face, leaving no room for any "it wasn't the same person" defense. The third item was a timeline I had compiled, starting from Wang Xiaobao's poisoning on the afternoon of September 30th, to my call to the police, the arrival of the police, and Wang Xiaobao being taken away. Each point was supported by corresponding evidence, surveillance timestamps, police report records, and the case file numbers from the police station. I bundled all of this together with the link to the earlier local forum post and sent it to Zhou Ming, the older brother of my college classmate, who now works as a content editor at a local self-media studio. Their account ranks among the top 3 in local lifestyle public accounts, often posting social news and public interest topics. with readership frequently exceeding 100,000. More importantly, they had previously published several in-depth reports on parental responsibility behind juvenile delinquency, a topic right up their alley. At 10 o'clock on the last night of the National Day holiday, I sent over the materials. Zhou Ming quickly replied, saying he had spent an hour reviewing all the materials. And then he called me. During the call, he asked 3 questions. First, was the source of the tetramine photos legally verifiable? Second, could the surveillance video be authorized for use after they blurred certain parts? Third, was the person involved willing to be interviewed? I replied, the photos were taken by me in a public area, the storage room door was unlocked at the time, so there was no issue of illegal trespassing. The surveillance video was my private property, and I authorized them to use it. As for the interview, I could accept a phone interview but would not appear on camera. He said okay, then asked me a question that wasn't on his list. Why are you doing this? I mean, why not settle privately, take some money and be done with it? I thought for a moment and replied, because some things can't be resolved with money. He fell silent for a few seconds on the other end of the line, then said, understood. Hung up the phone. 3 days later, the report was published. The headline read, "He's just a child behind the poisoning case, a complete sample of juvenile crime." The report was quite lengthy, nearly 10,000 words, divided into 5 sections. The first part covered the case itself, the poisoning process captured on surveillance footage, the police response, the suspect's age and family background. The second part presented neighbors' testimonies, what outrageous things Wang Xiaobao had done growing up, and how his parents had repeatedly used "he's just a child, he doesn't know any better" to settle things. The third part featured a photo of the rat poison in the storage room, enlarged and placed prominently in the middle of the article, with a small caption below, "The rat poison the suspect casually took from the storage room at home, which had no safety lock." The fourth part provided a legal analysis, inviting legal experts to discuss sentencing standards for juvenile poisoning cases and whether guardians should bear criminal responsibility. The fifth part ended with an open question, what would have happened if there had been no surveillance footage? The report was published at 7 a.m., and by noon, the read count had already exceeded 500,000. The top comments in the comments section had been upvoted into the tens of thousands. These parents are even more despicable than the perpetrator. Her father still wants to settle with money. Like father, like son, he's 17 and still doesn't know better. I was already working to support my family at 17. I suggest holding the parents criminally liable as well. They live in our neighborhood. This family has always been particularly arrogant. Finally, they're getting what they deserve. By the afternoon, the situation had escalated to the point where local TV stations were calling to schedule interviews with me. I declined, saying the case was still in the judicial process and it wasn't appropriate to comment further, but the real reason was that I knew there was no need for me to say anything more. The avalanche of public opinion had already formed, and it would roll on its own, crushing everything in its path. In the evening, I stood on the balcony and saw a white van parked downstairs with the words City Channel printed on its side. A female reporter knocked on the Wang family's door with a microphone. The door opened a crack, and I heard Lu Zuifen's voice from inside. Hoarse and almost inhuman, "Stop filming, stop filming," I said. "We're not giving interviews." The door slammed shut. The reporter didn't leave. She stood downstairs for a while, interviewing a few neighbors passing by. Auntie Zhang from upstairs shook her head and sighed while speaking to the camera, repeating one phrase the most, "That child should have been disciplined long ago." I stood behind the curtains, watching it all, my face expressionless. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was excited, nor because I felt guilty, but because of an indescribable emptiness. It was as if you had spent a long time climbing to the top of a mountain, only to find that the view from up there wasn't quite what you had imagined. The wind was strong, and it made you feel a little cold. I sat on the bed, turned on my phone screen, and scrolled through the photo album. Inside were pictures my parents had taken at the train station before their trip, my mother wearing a newly bought silk scarf, my father standing straight beside her, both of them smiling brightly. They had no idea what kind of revenge their daughter was carrying out at home. I zoomed in on the photo and stared at my mother's smiling face for a long time. In my previous life, when she died, white foam had dripped from the corner of her mouth, her eyes had rolled back, and her entire face had turned bluish-purple. In this life, she could still smile, still stand in front of the train station wearing a silk scarf for a photo. I had done all of this for that image, and I didn't regret it, but I still couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned until after 3 in the morning before finally drifting off into a fitful sleep. In my dream, scenes from my previous life and this life were jumbled together, my mother taking a sip from a water glass, then the glass turning into a water dispenser bucket, and the bucket transforming into an evidence box in a courtroom. The judge struck the gavel, and the sound echoed like thunder. When I woke up with a start, the sky was already bright. On October 12th, someone I hadn't expected came looking for me. It was Wang Jiangwo. He didn't corner me in the hallway like last time but chose a place I was bound to pass by, the breakfast shop I frequented at the entrance of the residential complex. As I stepped out of the shop holding a cup of soy milk, I saw him standing under a tree outside, smoking a cigarette. His gray jacket was stained with a few grease spots. His hair was as messy as a bird's nest, and he looked about 20 years older than he had 10 days earlier. When he saw me, he threw the cigarette butt on the ground, crushed it under his foot, and walked toward me. I instinctively took a step back, and the soy milk in my hand sloshed. Not because I was afraid he would attack me. In broad daylight, a grown man wouldn't dare lay a hand on a young girl. What I feared was that he might suddenly kneel down and beg me. I had heard from the neighbors that he had already gone to plead with several influential people these past few days. The neighborhood committee director, an acquaintance at the police station, the school principal, each time with that same humble demeanor, but each time he had been turned away empty-handed. In the end, he didn't kneel, nor did he act humble. He stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched, with dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked like pits. The look in his eyes held neither anger nor pleading but something I couldn't quite describe, like a gambler who had lost all his chips, sitting at the entrance of a casino watching passers-by. His eyes completely empty. "You were the one who leaked that story, weren't you?" he said, not as a question, but as a statement. I didn't deny it. He fell silent for a moment, then pulled a cigarette from his pocket and stuck it in his mouth but didn't light it. The cigarette dangled from the corner of his lips, trembling as he spoke. People back in my hometown saw that report too. My dad called to scold me. Said I've brought shame on the family. Over a decade of building trust, driving long haul routes, gone. The company told me to take some time off. Suifen's mother, Xiaobao's grandma, got so angry she ended up in the hospital. "Are you satisfied now?" He asked those 3 words again. "Are you satisfied now?" Just like last time in the hallway, but the tone he used was completely different. Last time it was anger, an accusation, the words of someone who still believed they could turn things around. This time, it sounded like someone who had already conceded defeat, just confirming the score. I placed the soy milk on the lid of the trash can beside me, tucking both hands into the pockets of my coat. The October wind was already a bit chilly, blowing dry against my face. Across the street, a line had formed outside the breakfast shop, steam rising from the bamboo steamers in a hazy white cloud. "Uncle Wang, let me tell you a story," I said. He paused, clearly not expecting me to say that. "When you used to drive long distances, did you ever come across a driver who was driving while exhausted, you know, someone who clearly knew they were so tired they could barely hold the steering wheel, yet still insisted on driving, until the car flipped over on the side of the highway, destroying both the vehicle and the person inside? Tell me, whose responsibility is that?" Wang Jiangwo didn't speak. The cigarette in his mouth trembled slightly in the wind. "I think the responsibility lies in 2 places. First, of course, it's the driver himself, but second," I looked at him, "it's the person sitting in the passenger seat. If the passenger is snoring, then fine, but if the passenger isn't snoring, and instead says, 'It's okay, you keep driving, I'll watch you,' then shouldn't that person also bear some responsibility?" He understood. The expression on his face changed in that instant, not with surprise or anger, but with a kind of painful clarity, as if something deep inside had been pierced. "When Wang Xiaobao drove the car to the edge of the cliff, both of you were in the front passenger seats, one shelling sunflower seeds, the other dozing off," I said, my voice still calm, as if I were talking about something completely unrelated to me. "Now the car has fallen off the cliff, you turn around and tell people that kid couldn't drive himself. Do you think anyone would believe that?" The wind blew the cigarette out of his mouth. It fell to the ground, rolled twice, and stopped at my feet. I didn't pick it up. Silence, long silence. The radio in the breakfast shop poked its head out to glance at us, then retreated. The sound of traffic on the street, footsteps on the sidewalk, the distant cries of vendors, all the sounds were still there, but in the 2-meter space between me and Wang Jiangwo, everything seemed to have stopped. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse, as if a wad of cotton had been stuffed in his throat. What if I turned myself into the police station with Suefin? This time it was my turn to be stunned. I bought the rat poison. It was my fault for not locking it properly. The failure to properly educate the child is my responsibility and Suefin's. He raised his eyes to look at me, his gaze bloodshot, clouded with exhaustion and utter numbness. If we go in, accept the investigation, and are willing to face the legal consequences, could you give my son a way out? Not full forgiveness, just let him get a lighter sentence, so he still has a chance to come out and start over. I didn't say anything. He's only 17, Wang Jiangwo said, his voice trembling, not pretending, truly trembling. Even if he's a beast, I raised. If there's punishment, punish me. The soy milk machine at the breakfast shop hummed steadily, with clouds of steam rising in thick puffs. I stood there, staring at the man before me, and the emotions welling up inside me were far more complicated than I had anticipated. Not pity. No, I could be 100% certain it wasn't pity. Wang Jiangwo didn't deserve pity. He had never shown pity to any of the people his son had hurt. The only thing he cared about was his own bloodline. But the words he had just said made me think of something. If Wang Xiaobao really spent a year or two in juvenile detention and then came out, his life wouldn't end there. He would carry the mark of a poisoning criminal into the sunlight, living on. When he returned, his mother would still be waiting at the door, still cooking for him, still saying, it's okay, let's go home. That wasn't the end of revenge. True revenge was destroying a family from its roots, making the three of them resent each other, blame one another, tearing apart piece by piece what had once bound them together. If Wang Jiangwo and Lu Cuifan had voluntarily gone to face the investigation and admitted their negligence, the nature of this case would have been completely different. It would shift from child poisoning to parental negligence leading to child poisoning. Even if lawyer Yan Jiangwo were the most skilled, he couldn't clean up the stain of a parent who had openly admitted their failure, and while Wang Xiaobao was in juvenile detention, he would hear from his classmates that it was his parents who had sent him there, not because he had done something wrong, but because his parents were incompetent. On that day, the family would truly be finished. I won't stop you from turning yourselves in. I bent down, picked up the cigarette butt on the ground, and tossed it into the nearby trash can. But I still won't sign the letter of forgiveness. Wang Jiangwo looked at me, and the last glimmer of light in his eyes dimmed. I picked up the soy milk from the lid of the trash can, turned around, and walked back. After a few steps, I glanced back, still standing in place, head down, shoulders hunched, like a tree bent by the wind. 2 days later, I received word. Wang Jiangwo and Lu Cuifan had gone to the police station and voluntarily admitted their failure in properly storing hazardous materials and in disciplining their minor child. The police took their statements, then referred the case to the procuratorate, to be handled together with the main case. Once the news spread, public opinion exploded again. This time, the headlines read, "Parents in poisoning case turn themselves in, negligent parents finally wake up." The comments were split. Some said, "Where were you earlier?" Others said, "At least they did one right thing in the end." But I knew the truth. They didn't turn themselves in to do the right thing. They had no other choice. Living under the constant scrutiny and judgment of others was no better than going to jail. For me, none of that matters anymore. What matters is, my revenge plan has entered its final stage. I returned to my room, took the photo of the three of us from the album, and placed it on the nightstand. In the picture, my parents and I were standing by the sea, the wind blowing through our hair, all three of us smiling. It was taken during the summer after I got into high school. The sunlight was bright, the sea was blue. I propped up the photo and looked at it for a while. Soon, I whispered, outside the window. The sky had already darkened, the streetlights in the neighborhood flickered on, casting patches of orange-yellow light on the ground. The windows of the Wang family's house were dark, the curtains tightly drawn, not a single ray of light seeping through. Standing by the window, I gazed at that pitch blackness and thought, this is far from over, but the hardest part is already behind me. What comes next is to wait for the court to convene, wait for the verdict to be announced, and then take the outcome to 4 places. On the day the court convened, I didn't go, not because I was afraid to face it, but because I felt it wasn't necessary. I had done everything I needed to do, and the evidence I had to submit had long been submitted. In the courtroom, there were prosecutors, judges, lawyers, media, and members of the public in attendance. They didn't need me there. Even if I went, I'd just be sitting in the gallery, staring at the backs of the 3 Wang family members' heads, listening to the judge announce results I already knew, so I didn't go. I went somewhere else instead. The weather was bad that day. It had been raining since morning, not the kind of roaring summer downpour, but the fine, persistent cold rain unique to autumn. The raindrops were thin and dense, stinging the face like needles, and when the wind blew, the chill seeped into the bones. I carried a black umbrella and first went to a flower shop to buy a bouquet of white chrysanthemums. The shopkeeper asked if I wanted to add some baby's breath, but I said no, just the white chrysanthemums, wrapped simply. Then I took a taxi to the cemetery on the east side of the city. The cemetery was built halfway up the mountainside, looking up from the foot of the hill. Rows of gray tombstones were embedded into the slope, like books standing upright, in the rain. The cemetery was almost empty, except for an old caretaker in a raincoat patrolling the hillside in the distance. He gave me a slight nod from afar before continuing toward the other side. I climbed the stone steps one by one. The rain drummed against my umbrella, sounding like someone gently tapping a drum with their fingers. The pine and cypress trees lining the stone steps were washed glossy by the rain, and the air was filled with the sharp, earthy scent of soil mixed with pine needles. My grandfather and grandmother's graves are in the eastern section of the cemetery, next to an old locust tree. My maternal grandparents' graves are in the western section, beside a row of newly built double burial plots. The 4 elders passed away one after another within less than a year, all because of my death and that of my parents in their previous life. My grandfather was the first to go, suffering a heart attack at my parents' funeral and dying before he could be taken to the hospital. My grandmother lasted 3 months, and it was a neighbor who discovered she hadn't left the house for several days. When they forced the door open, she was already peacefully lying in bed, gone. My maternal grandmother had lost sight in one eye, and after a fall, she never got up again. My maternal grandfather was the last to die, alone, with no one by his side. I didn't know about these things in my previous life. They were forced into my mind on the day of my rebirth, when my soul drifted and witnessed those scenes. Those images were even more unbearable than the memory of my own poisoning and death, because when I died, the pain was real, but it passed quickly. But for the 4 elders, every sunrise was a knife, reminding them day after day. Their child was gone, their granddaughter was gone, everything was gone. I walked up to my grandfather's grave and leaned the umbrella against the headstone, covering the open space in front of the tomb. Then I divided the white chrysanthemums into 4 bunches, one placed before my grandfather's grave, and one before my grandmother's. The other 2 I held in my arms, to be used later when I went to the western section. The headstone was engraved with my grandfather's name and the dates of his birth and death. I crouched down and wiped the rain-dampened dust from the stone surface with my hand. The marble was cold to the touch, and rainwater trickled through my fingers, pooling into a small puddle at the base of the monument. Grandpa, I'm here. My voice was soft, mostly drowned out by the wind, but I kept speaking, as if he could really hear me. I did it. That little bastard who poisoned our house, his trial started today. The evidence is solid. He can't escape. His mother can't escape either. Their whole family will pay for what happened that day. The wind blew over, and the rainwater on the locust tree branches poured down, splashing onto the umbrella. The sounds suddenly grew louder, then faded. You, Grandma, Grandpa, and Grandma on Mom's side, take care over there. Don't worry about us. I've protected my parents' lives for the rest of their days. At this point, my throat suddenly tightened. I paused for a few seconds, swallowing the sour, bitter feeling, then stood up, raised my umbrella, and walked toward Grandma's grave. To get from the eastern section to the western section, I had to cross a main path through the cemetery. The pine and cypress trees on either side were neatly trimmed, like 2 rows of silent sentinels. As I walked, a thought suddenly crossed my mind. In my past life, these 4 graves had truly existed. The 4 elders had been driven to their deaths by the life and death struggles of our family of 3, and the family next door, after all this happened, simply moved away, changed cities, and continued with their lives. No one remembered the blood of our family, no one remembered the tears of the 4 elders. But in this life, it's different. After placing all 4 bouquets of flowers, I stood in front of Grandma's grave and took out my phone to check the time. The trial was scheduled for 9:30 a.m., and it was now 11:05, according to the normal process. The trial should have been more than halfway through. After a moment's thought, I opened WeChat and sent a message to Zhou Ming. Any news from the trial? Zhou Ming replied quickly, yes. Wang Xiaobao pleaded guilty in court. He cried so much during the judge's questioning that he couldn't speak clearly. his parents were in the gallery, and his mother kept crying. The prosecution recommended 2 years in a juvenile detention center, and the defense lawyer is pushing for 1 year. The judge hasn't announced the verdict yet. It might take a few days. I put my phone away and looked up at Grandma's tombstone. 2 years, 1 year, these numbers didn't really matter to me anymore, because I knew that for Wang Xiaobao, the real hell wasn't inside the juvenile detention center, it was outside. When he gets out, he'll find that the world has changed. His classmates will have gone to college, all the neighbors he knew will have moved away, his family's house will have been sold to pay off debts, his father will have lost his long-haul trucking job, and his mother will have been recognized while working odd jobs at a supermarket and won't be able to keep working. Most importantly, he'll realize that the way his mother looks at him has changed. Before, they saw him as, my precious son, now, they see him as, the one who ruined our family, a child raised with excessive parental love, only to end up resented by his parents. This punishment is 100 times worse than prison. The rain gradually lightened. I closed my umbrella, letting the fine drizzle fall on my hair and shoulders. Standing among the 4 tombstones, I suddenly felt a deep quiet, not the external kind, for the cemetery was already quiet. It was internal, the voice inside me that had been screaming, roaring, and gnashing its teeth since the first day of my rebirth had finally fallen silent. It hadn't disappeared, it had simply found a place within me and settled down quietly. I stayed in the cemetery for a long time. By the time I started down the mountain, it was already past 1 in the afternoon. The rain had completely stopped, and a crack had opened in the clouds, revealing a small patch of pale blue sky. Sunlight leaked through the gap, shining on the wet stone pavement, sparkling like a layer of crushed glass. I didn't go straight home, I went to the courthouse. By the time I arrived, there were hardly any people left at the entrance, only 2 cleaning aunties mopping the steps. The mop splashed noisily in their buckets. I stood across the street, looking at the gray building, at the national emblem hanging above the portico, for a long while. Then I turned and walked away. The verdict came down 3 days later. It was lighter than what the prosecutor had recommended but harsher than what the defense had fought for. Wang Xiaobao was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months of reformatory education, with additional civil compensation. Wang Zhengwo was fined for improper storage of hazardous materials. Lu Zuifan was not held criminally liable, but in the supplementary remarks of the verdict, the judge used rather severe language to criticize the guardian's negligence. On the day the verdict was announced, local media ran another round of reports. I skimmed through the comments, and most people felt the sentence was too light, but some said, at least he's going in, it's not completely without consequences. I didn't participate in any discussions, nor did I post anything else on social media. My revenge was over, but some things are more important than revenge. 3 days after the verdict, my parents returned from their trip. I went to the train station to pick them up. As soon as my mom saw me, she pulled me into a hug, muttering, "You've lost weight. You've lost weight. Have you not been eating properly?" My dad, pushing the luggage cart beside her, rolled his eyes at me. "You're a grown adult and still can't take care of yourself," but the corners of his mouth were turned up, and his eyes were full of laughter. As I helped them carry their luggage to the parking lot, my mom suddenly stopped and looked at my face, frowning. "Xiaoxia, what's wrong with your eyes? Why are they red?" "It's nothing, I didn't sleep well last night," I smiled, putting the luggage into the trunk. I didn't tell them what had happened in the past half-month, the surveillance, the rat poison, the police, the court, none of it. They had no idea about any of it. They were soaking in hot springs in the mountains of a neighboring province, strolling through ancient towns, taking countless photos, buying my mom a new silk scarf and my dad a new razor. They were living well, they deserved to live well. Sitting in the back of a taxi, I leaned against my mom's shoulder, closing my eyes. The scenery outside the window blurred past, sunlight streaming through the window, warm and comforting. "Mom," I said, "I'll come home more often in the future." My mom paused for a moment, then smiled, reaching out to stroke my hair. "Why are you suddenly saying that, you kid?" I didn't answer, just hugged her arm a little tighter. When we returned to the residential complex, the taxi stopped at the foot of the building. I helped them carry their luggage down, then walked toward the entrance of the building. As I reached the ground floor, I suddenly stopped. At the stairwell entrance, there was a notice posted, white paper with black characters, a notice from the property management. It said that the owner of the apartment next door had entrusted a real estate agent to list the house for sale, and potential buyers might be coming in and out soon, asking neighbors to be vigilant about safety. I read the notice once, then looked away. Carrying my luggage into the building, as I passed by Wang's door, I didn't turn my head. The security door, adorned with a Fu character, was tightly shut, with no slippers or trash bags outside, no sign of anyone living there. Lu Zuifan moved out a few days after the verdict was handed down. She reportedly returned to her hometown. After completing his last delivery for the logistics company, Wang Jiangwo left the province and was never seen again. And Wang Xiaobao should still be in the juvenile detention center now, wearing a uniform, with a uniform haircut, waking up at 6 in the morning, lights out at 9 in the evening. He must have realized by now that the world he thought would always forgive him no longer existed. That was enough. After entering the house, I helped them unpack their luggage item by item. My mom pulled a plastic bag from her purse containing 2 boxes of local specialty snacks, telling me to try them. My dad dug out a newly bought kitchen knife from the bottom of the suitcase and proudly said to my mom, "This one has a good steel edge, you can't find one this good in the supermarket." I watched them bicker from the side, the corners of my mouth unconsciously curling upward. After dinner, I volunteered to do the dishes. The kitchen faucet gushed hot water, soap suds piled high on the porcelain bowls, the sound of the TV and my dad's snoring drifted in from the living room. He had fallen asleep on the sofa. My mom sat beside him, watching TV and cracking sunflower seeds. I washed the bowls one by one and stacked them on the drying rack, my hands soaked in the hot water, the skin slightly reddened by the heat. But that warm feeling gave me a sense of steadiness. This was the feeling of being alive, a feeling I hadn't had the chance to experience again in my previous life. After finishing the dishes, I dried my hands and returned to my room. I opened my phone and checked the surveillance feed. The water dispenser was still there, standing quietly in the corner. The living room light cast a warm, yellowish glow on the floor tiles. Reflecting a soft light, I uninstalled the surveillance app. I'd just leave the camera behind the decorative painting, since I wouldn't need it anymore. Then I opened WeChat and sent Zhou Ming a message. "Thank you for helping me with that report. This matter is over now, no need to follow up anymore." Zhou Ming replied with an "okay" emoji and asked, "So what are your plans next?" I thought about the message for a moment, then typed a few words, "live well." After sending it, I placed my phone on the nightstand. Before the screen went dark, I saw the photo of the family of 3 on the nightstand, the beach, the sunlight, the smiles of 3 people. I reached over, picked up the photo, and placed it beside my pillow. Then I turned off the light. In the darkness, I heard my mother cracking sunflower seeds in the living room, my father's intermittent snoring, and the music from some unknown program on the TV. These sounds mingled together, noisy and trivial, yet incredibly precious. The nights of my past life were quiet, too quiet, quiet like a tomb, but this life's nights were noisy, warm, alive. I turned over and buried my face in the pillow. It carried the scent of sun-dried warmth, dry and comforting. The images from my past life still lingered in my mind. They wouldn't fade. I knew they never would. My mother's ashen face, my father's body collapsed on the floor, the bloody marks my own fingers had clawed into the tiles. These scenes would follow me for the rest of my life, until the day I truly died. But it was okay, because alongside those images, new ones had begun to grow. My mother's smiling face wrapped in a silk scarf at the train station entrance, my father's expression of annoyance at my laziness yet with the corners of his mouth turned upward, the sizzle of frying eggs in the kitchen, the sound of snoring and cracking melon seeds in the living room. The old images were black, the new ones golden. Gold may not always cover black, but they could coexist. Like a sapling growing from the ruins, its roots buried in scorched soil, but its leaves reaching toward the sun. I am that tree. Before closing my eyes, my last thought was, tomorrow morning, I'll buy soy milk and fried dough sticks, sweet soy milk for my mom, and salty for my dad. I'll have a bowl of tofu pudding myself, with extra chili. The word, tomorrow, is so good. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.